Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. The amazing story of reggae music is simply overflowing with an assortment of colorful, crazy and unique characters, but no other figure in the genre comes close to the enigmatic brilliance and mystery of the subject of today's video. In 1978, Lee Scratch Perry had morphed from a roving producer to the founder and owner of Jamaica's hottest and most innovative production studio. It was an era that he was enjoying unprecedented levels of international as well as domestic success, thanks to a long chain of groundbreaking smash hits albums and songs that he was churning out at his music lab, some of which have gone down as being among the greatest in reggae history. He was the most in-demand producer, and his headquarters, known as the Black Ark Studios, became like a kind of treasure island where musicians and record industry executives from different parts of the world went hunting for musical treasure every day of the week. But at the peak of his powers, in a very bizarre display of his trademark eccentric or plain and downright loony traits, Perry would with his own hands torch and burn his own studio to the ground, destroying an outfit which had taken him years to turn into the engine room of the cutting edge of reggae music, before disappearing into self-imposed exile from the music business for almost 2 decades. But how did this outlandish event come to be? Let's take a look at why the great Lee Scratch Perry destroyed the legendary Black Ark Studios in 1979. And now this tale begins with a trip down memory lane to the time when Lee Scratch Perry was still what you could call a suitcase producer. That term was used to describe producers who didn't have studios of their own, but instead pay for recording time at different studios to record their own clients. Other well-known suitcase producers included the likes of Bonnie Lee and Nine the Observer. Perry had begun his career in music as an employee of Coxsone Dodd at Studio One and had performed several roles, including an artist, songwriter, percussionist, and talent scout, before leaving to join producer Joe Gibbs and subsequently quitting to start producing in 1968. And he would register his own record company named the Upsetter label. It was under the Upsetter imprint that he would go on to assemble his now legendary studio backing band named the Upsetters and craft monster hits like 1968's Return of Django and the Wailers' 1970 album Soul Rebels. And by the early 1970s, Perry got a vision to establish his own studio right in the back of his family house in the Duhaney Park neighborhood of Kingston. And with the money he had made over the past 5 years, he would build his much-awaited studio, which he named the Black Ark in 1973. Now in his own space, he was free to give his eccentric brilliance full expression, and over time would make it the hottest studio in Jamaica, while using simple and almost primitive recording equipment. While other studios were using 8-track or even 16-track recorders, Perry was still using a 4-track recorder, but was creating out-of-this-world results with unconventional but brilliant methods. Amidst a multitude of groundbreaking classic hits that he would craft in those times, some of his biggest creations would include Max Romeo's War in Babylon, Junior Mervin's Police and Thieves, and the Heptones' Party Time. Perry's studio was by the mid-1970s attracting attention like a cube of sugar in an ant colony. Chris Blackwell was one of Perry's biggest fans and was a frequent visitor at the studio. He had entered into a partnership between Island Records and Upsetter that saw him introduce Perry's works on the international markets, with the likes of Max Romeo benefiting from that deal. Artists from all over Jamaica and indeed the globe were all lining up for their own share of the Upsetter magic, with artists from as far away as Africa coming to record at Black Ark. But beneath all the musical magic, Lee Scratch Perry's private life was unraveling with all the loony stuff that he was getting up to. Perry had come from a highly spiritual background, as his mother had been a practitioner of various African religions, and in addition to his Rastafarian beliefs, he would take it all up several notches higher. And over time, his studio began to reflect his spiritual side and began to look like a shrine with mystic words and symbols that he drew all over the walls. He would also display countless eccentric antics at home that began to alienate him from his wife Pauline. For more than 5 years since that studio had been built, Perry had been deeply immersed in creating the perfect sound and worked day and night, barely sleeping and indulging heavily in alcohol and herb. He not only entertained lots of girlfriends, but would do strange things like take a pot full of food that his wife was cooking and dump the contents on the floor before replacing it with rocks on the fire. His wife Pauline was said to be slowly losing her mind with all the craziness going on at the Black Ark yard, and eventually left him to keep her sanity. Now with his wife gone, the remaining vestiges of stability in his life evaporated and all the madness would go into overdrive. He'd been hosting a Rastafarian group that he belonged to called the Nyabingi Theocracy at the Black Ark Studios, and that group's presence at the studio had grown larger over time. But now with Pauline gone, they almost took over the entire place, and as their numbers would swell, so too did an endless stream of hangers-on, idlers, and leeches, all looking for a free meal from Perry. And that role came with plenty of responsibilities, both financially and time-wise. He was then badly stretched, but despite all the pressures, he was still churning out awesome music for his clientele as well as his own material, as he would release his own incredible album, Rosefish, Collyweed and Cornbread in 1978. And not to mention craft classic songs like Black Man Redemption and Punky Reggae Party for Bob Marley and the Wailers. He had reached breaking point by the end of 1978, but was somehow still holding it all together and would steady that ship up until the end of the year. But by early 1979, he began to come under even more financial pressure from musicians and other people that he owed money to, and even more demands from some of the most dangerous men and notorious gang members in Kingston, and the most dangerous being a gang called the Spanglers that came by Black Ark Studios every day to extort protection money from Perry. To put it mildly, Perry's life was out of control due to a combination of good intentions, bad intentions, and outright craziness that was all exacerbated by the exit of his wife, who had been in charge of managing his money as well as the studio in general. So after the police and the authorities began to raid Black Ark Studios for all sorts of reasons, Perry snapped and became very aggressive towards everyone around him, from the Rastafarian order to artists, and I mean everybody. He would denounce his Rastafarian faith and shaved off the dreadlocks he was growing. And by the end of January, Black Ark was entirely devoid of visitors and new clients. And one day, in a fit of rage, Perry took a can of petrol and some matches to his musical headquarters and set fire to it, burning it to ashes, along with plenty of master tapes of some of reggae's greatest compilations and creations. In his mind, it was his own way of exorcising his demons and cleansing his own destiny of all the filth. From then on, Perry practically stopped making music before leaving Jamaica on self-imposed exile, spending several years in the UK and the US. He would eventually move to Switzerland in 1989 and establish a new studio that he named the Blue Ark. Interestingly, very few people knew that Black Ark Studios had been brought down by Perry himself until around 2015, when he revealed it himself in an interview. But most amazingly, history would repeat itself 36 years after the torching of Black Ark Studios by his own hand. His Blue Ark Studios in Switzerland, where he had been since 1989, was also burnt to the ground in 2015, only this time by accident, when he left a candle burning and went home for the night. But this second fire even seemed to be more costly than the first, as it contained decades of music, his costumes, equipment, and memorabilia dating back 30 plus years. Lee Scratch Perry is without a doubt the most out there character that the reggae world has ever seen, and the whole Black Ark Studio affair is prime example of the crazy yet genius life of the man known as the Upsetter. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.